Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Advaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Sri Advaita Chandra Ki Jai. So today is the glorious appearance day of Sri Advaita Acharya. And we have this, just 1 second. Today is also a half-day fast and a midday kirtan. No, there's no Pushpanjali. Just at 12 o'clock. 12 o'clock, yeah. And it's fortuitous, the day back, so we should have a good showing, right? Okay. And it is the 7th of February. Okay, let me just announce this. So on this 7th day of February, the glorious appearance day of Sri Advaita Acharya, we're going to be speaking a little bit from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And also, there's a book written by Satyaraj Prabhu, the Panchatattva. And we'll read some excerpts there about Advaita Acharya. Okay, so the verse on the board is Adi Lila, chapter 1, text 13. We can chant that one. Advaitam Harinadvaitan Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Ishamtam Advaita Acharyam Ashraye Advaitam Harinadvaitan Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Ishamtam Advaita Acharyam Ashraye Advaitam Harinadvaitan Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Ishamtam Advaita Acharyam Ashraye Advaitam Harinadvaitan Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Ishamtam Advaita Acharyam Ashraye. Advaitam Harinadvaitad Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Ishamtam Advaitacharyam Ashraye. Vijay Prabhu. Advaitam Harinadvaitad Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Ishamtam Advaitacharyam Ashraye. Someone else? Advaitam Harinadvaitan Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Ishamtam Advaitacharyam Ashraye. Dimitri. Advaitam Harinadvaitan Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Ishamtam Advaita Acharya Prabhu. Govardhan. Advaitam Hadinadvaitan Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Hishamtam Advaita Acharya Prabhu. Tyler, you can do. Advaitam Hadinadvaitan Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Ishamtam Advaita Acharya Prabhu. Advaitam Hadinadvaitan Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat Bhaktavataram Ishamtam Advaita Acharya Prabhu. Zoomland? Okay.
Advaitam Harinadvaitan
Advaitam Hadinadvaitan
Acharyam Bhakti Samsanat
Acharyam Bhakti Shangsanat
Bhaktavataram Isamtam
Bhaktavataram Ishamtam
Advaita Acharyam Ashraye.
Advaita Acharya Prabhu. Advaitam, known as Advaita. Hadina, with Lord Hari. Advaitat, from being non-different. Acharyam, known as Acharya. Bhakti Shangsanat, from the propagation of devotional service to Krishna. Bhakta Avataram, the incarnation as a devotee. Isham, to the Supreme Lord. Tam, to him. Advaita Acharyam, to Advaita Acharya. Ashraye, I surrender. Dimitri, lower this down a little for me. Thank you. So this is the 13th verse of the beginning of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, part of the Mangala Charan, in which Krishna Kaviraj introduces all of the subjects and the main personalities he's going to write about. Because he is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Lord, he is called Advaita. And because he propagates the cult of devotion, he is called Acharya. He is the Lord and the incarnation of the Lord's devotee. Therefore, I take shelter of him. So, Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnanandana Shalakaya Chakshu Unmidatam Mena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I was born in the darkest of ignorance, but my spiritual master Srila Prabhupada opened my eyes with the torchlight of knowledge. I offer my humble obeisances unto him and to all members of Sri Parampara. So Advaita Acharya is famous for several pastimes, and the most famous perhaps is his inviting Lord Krishna to come as Lord Chaitanya by his loud cries. In fact, one of his names is Hankar, because whenever he's calling out and chanting, those name is often used that word is used in the Bhagavad. It means loud, loud, loud calling, piercing the barriers of the universe. So we'll begin with that account here in the 13th chapter of the Adi Lila. This is beginning in chapter 13, text 63 of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Lila. Okay. Before the appearance of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, all the devotees of Navadvip used to gather in the house of Advaita Acharya. In these meetings of the Vaishnavas, Advaita Acharya used to recite the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, decrying the paths of philosophical speculation and fruitive activity, and establishing the super excellence of devotional service. In all the revealed scriptures of the Vedic culture, devotional service to Lord Krishna is explained throughout. Therefore, devotees of Lord Krishna do not recognize the processes of philosophical speculation, mystic yoga, unnecessary austerity, and so-called religious rituals. They do not accept any process but devotional service. In the house of Advaita Acharya, all the Vaishnavas took pleasure in always talking of Krishna, always worshipping Krishna, and always chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And Prabhupada writes a little purport here. On these principles only does the Krishna consciousness movement go on. We have no business other than to talk of Krishna, worship Krishna, and chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. But Sri Advaita Prabhu felt pained to see all the people without Krishna consciousness, simply merging in material sense enjoyment. So just another short purport here. A bona fide devotee of Lord Krishna is always pained to see the fallen condition of the whole world. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur used to say, there is no scarcity of anything within this world. The only scarcity is of Krishna consciousness. That is the vision of all pure devotees. Because of this lack of Krishna consciousness in human society, people are suffering terribly, being merged in an ocean of nescience and sense gratification. A devotee onlooker is very much aggrieved to see such a situation in the world. And we see how much this applied to Srila Prabhupada, and he imparted that urgency unto his disciples. Next text. Seeing the condition of the world, Advaita Acharya began to think seriously of how all the people could be delivered from the clutches of Maya. Srila Advaita Acharya thought, if Krishna himself appears in order to distribute the cult of devotional service, then only will liberation be possible for all people. Okay. With this consideration, Advaita Acharya Prabhu, promising to cause Lord Krishna to descend, began to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead with tulsi leaves and water of the Ganges. By loud cries, Krishnena Abhana Kade Sagana Hunkar. Here you go, the Hunkars. By loud cries, he invited Krishna to appear, and this repeated invitation attracted Lord Krishna to descend. Before the birth of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, 8 daughters took birth, one after another from the womb of Shachimata, the wife of Jagannath Mishra. But just after their birth, they all died. So this describes now the advent of Lord Chaitanya. That's the subject of the chapter. But the proximate cause was Advaita Acharya's very urgent cries. Now he himself, as explained in the first verse we chanted, is also Vishnu Tattva. He's Mahavishnu, and that will become clear later. And so is Nityananda Prabhu, who is Baladev. So Advaita Acharya, he was invited Lord Chaitanya to come, and he came on that basis. And so next, another famous pastime, has to do with, that Advaita Acharya was, of course, older. He was known to be 50 years older than Lord Chaitanya. So his birth year is accepted as 1436 AD. And that's why he has a beard like that. So not only was he older, but he was also a disciple of Madhavendra Puri, which you're going to read about. And so Lord Chaitanya is a disciple of Ishwar Puri, who's a disciple of Madhavendra Puri. So he regarded Advaita Acharya as his spiritual master, on the level of his spiritual master. So that's described here in this chapter 17 of the Adi Lila. Lord Chaitanya respected Advaita Acharya as his spiritual master, but Advaita Acharya Prabhu was greatly aggrieved by such behavior. He wanted to be in the position of the servant. Thus he seemingly whimsically, began to explain the path of philosophical speculation, and the Lord in his anger seemingly disrespected him. At that time Advaita Acharya was greatly pleased. The Lord understood this, and he was somewhat ashamed, but he offered Advaita Acharya his benediction. So Prabhupada explains this purport, this pastime in this purport here. Advaita Acharya was a disciple of Madhavendra Puri, Ishwar Puri's spiritual master. Therefore, Ishwar Puri, the spiritual master of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, was Advaita Acharya's godbrother. In view of this, Lord Chaitanya treated Advaita Acharya as his spiritual master. But Sri Advaita Acharya did not like this behavior of Lord Chaitanya, for he wanted to be treated as his eternal servant. Now, this is just before I go on here. There's a verse in the CC, I don't have the exact reference. Ekale Ishwara Krishna ar Sabha Britya, which means there's only one master, ultimate master, and that's Krishna. And all others are his servants. And that includes his expansions. Nityananda Prabhu is Balaram, but he also saw himself as a servant of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as Krishna. So Lord Krishna himself wanted to take that position. That's why he appeared as Lord Chaitanya, so he could be in the mood of the prime servant of Krishna, Srimati Radharani. There's so much pleasure in serving. So with that understanding, Advaita Acharya, he wanted to take that position of servant, but because of his being Madhavendra Puri's disciple, Lord Chaitanya was treating him with all this respect. So Prabhupada explains here. In view of this, Lord Chaitanya treated Advaita Acharya as his spiritual master, but Advaita Acharya did not like this behavior, for he wanted to be treated as his eternal servant. Advaita Prabhu's aspiration was to be a servant of the Lord, not his spiritual master. He therefore devised a plan to antagonize the Lord. He began to explain the path of philosophical speculation in the midst of some unfortunate Mayavadis. And when Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard about this, he immediately went there and in a very angry mood began to beat Advaita Acharya. At that time, Advaita Acharya, greatly pleased, began to dance, saying, "Just see how my desire has now been fulfilled." Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu used to treat me honorably for so long, but now he is treating me neglectfully. This is my reward. His affection for me is so great that he wanted to save me from the hands of the Mayavadis. Hearing this statement, Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was somewhat ashamed, but he was very pleased with Advaita Acharya. A similar thing happened with Lord Nityananda and Shivananda Sain. Shivananda Sain, he would be the organizer of the great pilgrimage every year from Navadvip to Jagannath Puri of all Lord Chaitanya's Navadvip devotees. So you can imagine he had to pay all these tolls, arrange for the sleeping and eating arrangements for everybody, with hundreds of devotees. So he got delayed a little bit, and Nityananda was with his entourage, and there was nothing that hadn't been arranged for the eating and so forth. So when Shivananda Sain came, so actually first I think he said, I curse his sons to die. And Shivananda Sain's wife was there, and she started crying. Then Shivananda Sain came, and he kicked him. You know, and Shivananda Sain's elder son was upset about that, and then he went ahead. He didn't want to stay there. But Shivananda Sain says, "Oh, what a benediction! I've been kicked by Lord Nityananda. I've been blessed." You know. So he accepted it in the same way that Advaita Acharya did. Okay. So that's that pastime. And now I'd like to read a little bit at length. Concerning Advaita Acharya's meeting with Madhavendra Puri, which is recounted in this book called the Sri Panchatattva by Satyaraj Prabhu. He gets into a lot of detail on each of the 5 members of the Panchatattva. So this goes back because there's apparently a lot of information, maybe in the Bhakti Ratnakara and other books, about Lord Sri Advaita's childhood, his birth and upbringing. So this goes back to when he was in his teens. When Advaita Prabhu reached his teens, his parents, both in their late 80s or early 90s, departed for Vaikuntha, leaving behind the material world. Advaita, as part of his Lila, mourned the death of his parents and soon after went on pilgrimage. He first went to Orissa, where in great ecstasy he saw the Gopinath deity. He then went to Nabhigaya, Puri, Godavari, Shiva Kanchi, and Vishnu Kanchi, where he was amused to see the competition between the Shaivites and the Vaishnavas. He's also sometimes understood to be an incarnation of Sadashiva, who's related to Mahavishnu as his glance, it's the whole thing. So this is part of his identity. And then he went to different places, Kaveri, Madurai, Sedubanda, Dhanutirtha, Rameshwar, and Udupi, where he first met Srila Madhavendra Puri, who was to become his preceptor. Madhavendra Puri immediately felt great love for Advaita Acharya, whom he saw as the embodiment of the perfect devotee, and together they discussed the urgent need for an incarnation to descend to earth in the current age of quarrel and hypocrisy. Advaita then predicted the advent of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, telling Madhavendra Puri the confidential Lila of the Lord. After meeting Madhavendra Puri in Udupi and disclosing to him the Lord's mission, Advaita carried on with his pilgrimage, visiting Dandakaranya, Nashik, Dwaraka, Prabhath, Kurukshetra, etc. And then to his great delight, he arrived in Mithila, where he saw Sita Devi, that's the Sita who's the wife of Lord Ram, her place of birth. This made him shed tears of love. It was in Mithila that he is said to have met Vidyapati, the great devotional poet, and then he proceeded to Ayodhya, the eternal abode of Lord Ram. Now just one note on Vidyapati. In Lord Chaitanya's Lila, he especially liked to hear the songs of Vidyapati, the Gita Govinda of Jayadev Goswami, and of course the Krishna Charitamrita. So Vidyapati is, I've never seen a publication of his songs, but they're apparently very beautiful and conjugal Radha Krishna Lila. Then he went to Varanasi, the home of the Mayavadis. He bathed in the famous Manikarnika Ghat and saw the deity Vishwanath. This is Lord Shiva, the most famous deity of Varanasi. After this, he visited the temple of Adi Keshava and also saw the deity of Bindu Madhava. Then he traveled to Prayag, where he saw the Veni Madhava deity. At this point, he shaved his head and bathed in the Triveni, the meeting place of the Saraswati, Ganga, and Yamuna. He next went to Mathura, where he visited, among other places, the house of Kubja. He offered his deepest respects to Janmastan, the place of Krishna's birth. He then performed the whole Parikrama Braj, meditating on Krishna's Lila at each site. Finally, he arrived in Vrindavan. While there, he resided for some time at the foot of the Dvadashaditya Tila, the hill where Sanatana Goswami later built his famous Madana Mohan temple. The place where Advaita Prabhu lived, called Advaitavat, is still preserved and can be visited even today. Advaita Acharya's relation with the Madan Mohan deity is quite confidential. Now I had no idea about this till I read this. This is the same Madan Mohan who eventually Sanatana Goswami built the temple, the first temple in Vrindavan. One day when Advaita was sleeping under a banyan tree, the deity appeared to him in a dream and said, "I was being worshipped here, but the priest, because he was afraid of Muslim invaders, left me and fled to protect his own life. I am hidden at the Dvadashidatya Tila under the present flow of the Yamuna. Please unearth me and install me in my proper place." Does it sound familiar? The same Madhavendra Puri had a similar prayer for Gopal. And then he installed him on Govardhan Hill. A similar dream. After waking from his sleep, Advaita Prabhu found the site, dug up the deity, and installed him with the help of some local Brajbasis. They performed the customary bathing ceremony, and at that time Advaita rubbed Madan Mohan's body so thoroughly that the Lord regained his original smooth, blackish, sheeny complexion. Some days later, when Advaita Prabhu was traveling, a group of Muslims came and attacked Advaita Vata. That's the place where he was staying. The deity hid himself under a heap of old sanctified flowers that were previously offered to the Lord, and thus was not destroyed. When Advaita Prabhu returned, Madan Mohan again told him in a dream where he had hidden himself. He requested Advaita Prabhu to dig him up and give him to Purushottam Chaubey to serve as a devotee. This Purushottam was a Brahmin from Mathura who later gave Madan Mohan to Srila Sanatana Goswami to serve, and then eventually he built the big temple. The Lord told Advaita Prabhu that he, Advaita, should return to Shantipur in Bengal and install two deities there, one of Radha and one of Madan Gopal. He said that these deities should be carved according to a picture that was painted by Radharani's dear friend Vishaka. Madan Mohan further informed Advaita that the picture was hidden in the Seva Kunj and revealed its exact location. It was during this period that Madhavendra Puri came to Vrindavan and met Advaita Prabhu for the second time. Puripad went into fits of ecstasy when Advaita told him of Madan Mohan's order, and concurring with the deity, he explained to Advaita the inappropriateness of worshipping Krishna without Radha, since Krishna can never be happy without her love. She is his pleasure-giving potency, the Ladini Shakti, and Krishna feels incomplete without her presence. Now just a note, and some of you maybe know the answer to this question, because I remember when it was talking about the Chira Chora Gopinath deities, that deity was also alone, if I understand, although they painted him with Radharani because they didn't know. Srinathji is alone. So there's that tradition. And but the Gaudiya Vaishnavas maybe pioneered this Radha Krishna worship, but that caused a big stir in Jaipur, right? Because they're not married. There's this whole thing going. And so Baladev came there on the encouragement of Vishwanath Chakravarti to clear that up, and he wrote the Vedanta Sutra on the order of what is it, the Sri, well, not the Sri Bhasti, but the Govinda Bhasti, from the Govinda deity there. It was there with Radharani. So that establishment of Radha Krishna worship, I think, was inspired by Madhavendra Puri and the Gaudiya Vaishnavas. We had Radha Krishna worship. Inappropriateness. She is a pleasure-giving potency. Madhavendra Puri advised Advaita to get married in order to properly worship his deities. He suggested that a renunciant has a tendency to give up his deities at the time of death, but a householder always has his wife, children, and other relatives or descendants to take over the service of the deity if he falls ill or dies. Nevertheless, Madhavendra Puri assured Advaita Prabhu that he would take upon himself the reactions to any offenses made to the deity by the next 14 generations of Advaita Prabhu's family, the Advaita Vangsha. This was one reason why Advaita Prabhu got married and created the Advaita family lineage. Another reason, as seen in Nityananda Prabhu's example as well, was to spread the Yuga Dharma among householders, as opposed to just a select group of recluses and transcendentalists. Madhavendra Puri went with Advaita to Shantipur and stayed with him for 1 month. While there, he instructed Advaita in the science of chanting, telling him that the power of the holy name was the only way to attain deliverance in the present age of Kali. It was at this time in Shantipur that Madhavendra Puri gave initiation to Advaita Prabhu. Soon after the initiation ceremony, Madhavendra Puri left Shantipur to continue his mission in other parts of India. So you can see how that connection was so critical to the Advaita that's explained in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Advaita Prabhu quickly became the most respected Vaishnava in Shantipur. Once, after defeating a champion scholar in debate, a voice in the sky uttered the following words: "This Brahmin is not an ordinary man. He is God himself, because nobody is more learned than him. His name is Advaita," which means unrivaled as well as non-different. Advaita Prabhu met Haridas Thakur, the Muslim, but this is another pastime that's also recounted in this Chaitanya Charitamrita. Advaita Prabhu met Haridas Thakur, the Muslim-born devotee who was fully devoted to chanting the holy names of Hari, and they became great friends. Advaita built a dwelling for Haridas in a cave and personally trained him in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. The respect that these two pure devotees felt for each other cannot be described. Together they organized Sankirtan in Navadvip before Mahaprabhu came to work with them. Advaita Prabhu tried to encourage young Nimai Pandit to join their Sankirtan team, but Nimai was merely interested in scholarship prior to his Sankirtan pastime. So he has that whole pastime of, not being a Vaishnav. He was a Vaishnav, but not what we know as what he became later. It took some time and his relationship with Ishwar Puri before Chaitanya Mahaprabhu relented and outwardly showed his appreciation of the Vaishnavas. Before his marriage, Advaita Prabhu initiated Mahaprabhu's most intimate associates, such as Vasudev Dutt, Bhagavad Acharya, Shyamadas, Yodanandana Acharya, later the guru of Srila Raghunath Das Goswami, as well as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's parents. That story may be recounted as follows. So this is very fascinating. When baby Nimai refused his mother's breast milk, all of the town's physicians were brought in. The boy would not eat, and everyone feared that he might get sick. When nothing alleviated the boy's condition, Jagannath Mishra and Mother Shachi called for Advaita Acharya, for it was known that he had spiritual knowledge and could possibly help little Nimai. Advaita Prabhu's analysis of the situation, this was Advaita Prabhu's analysis. Nimai, setting the example of the perfect devotee, will only eat prasadam, food offered to Krishna with love and devotion. Mother Shachi was uninitiated, and therefore her breast milk was to be considered unoffered. It was not properly considered prasadam. Therefore, Nimai would not take her breast milk, but would instead only cry until the situation was corrected. The resolution to the dilemma, said Advaita, was to quickly initiate both Mother Shachi and her husband Jagannath into the chanting of the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Then, he said, Nimai would drink her milk. Sure enough, when the initiation was complete, little Nimai drank sumptuously, and all of Navadvip felt great relief. I never heard that one before. When Advaita Prabhu turned 50, he decided to take Madhavendra Puri's advice to get married. Nrsinga Baduri, the father of the bride-to-be, was alerted and renounced Brahman of the Narayanpur district of Saptagram. His daughter Sita was like the goddess of fortune. And according to tradition, she was an incarnation of Yogamaya, the mystic potency of the Lord. She appeared in this world in the month of September, 4 days before Radhashtami, and the appearance day of Srimati Radharani. She first saw Advaita Prabhu while crossing the Ganges on a boat with her father and her younger sister, Sri Devi. Nrsinga Baduri and his daughters were impressed by the beautiful golden form of Advaita Prabhu as he was performing his worship on the bank of the Ganga. Sita Devi especially appreciated Advaita's beauty. Some days later, Nrsinga Baduri took his daughters to Shantipur to perform worship of the goddess Bhagavati. Sita Devi's eyes met Advaita's and they admired each other once again. Shamadas then suggested the idea of a wedding to Nrsinga Baduri. Your daughter is actually Yogamaya and Advaita is God himself. How could anyone ever conceive of a better match? The bride was given away at Puliyagat on the bank of the Ganges. Later, Nrsinga Baduri gave his younger daughter, Sri Devi, in marriage to Advaita as well. So he married both sisters. Advaita Prabhu initiated his 2 young wives, just like Purnamasi, Yogamaya gave initiation to the 2 young girl messengers of Radha and Krishna, Veera and Vrinda. He then gave them instruction in Vaishnav Siddhanta, and gradually he told them about and gave them entrance into the highest form of meditation, the state of being Radharani's maidservants or manjaris. As he grew in years and wisdom, he instructed his disciples more and more in the intricacies of Bhakti Yoga. Advaita Prabhu could not tolerate the complete absence of spirituality in the people of his time. To alleviate the burden of the masses, he tried various forms of worship to propitiate the Supreme. He offered flowers to the Ganga, and by divine providence, these flowers floated downstream to touch the body of Mother Shachi, who was bathing there. As a result of this, her son, Vishwarup, Mahaprabhu's elder brother, an incarnation of Sankarshan, was born. The scriptures say that the Lord, who is very kind to his devotees, offers himself to whoever offers him even a mere tulsi leaf or a handful of water. Knowing this, Advaita Prabhu sat down on the bank of the Ganges, and his whole body shivering and perspiring with ecstasy, called for the Lord to descend with offerings of Ganga water and tulsi leaves. It was thus through Advaita's mercy that the Lord appeared. When Mahaprabhu displayed his pastimes in Navadvip, Advaita Prabhu was already settled in Shantipur. Still, Advaita would come regularly to see the Lord. The Chaitanya Bhagavat informs us that when Mahaprabhu showed his divine opulences, the Mahaprakash, for the first time in the house of Shiva's Thakur, Ramai Pandit came to Shantipur and told Advaita Prabhu about it. Advaita immediately came to Navadvip with his worship paraphernalia to perform the first celebration of Lord Chaitanya in the house of Nandanacharya. At that time, Advaita Prabhu worshipped the Lord with this verse, Namo Brahmanya Devaya. I'll stand, you chant. Namo Brahmanya Devaya, Go Brahmana Hitaya Cha, Jagadhitaya Krishnaya, Govindaya Namo Namaha. By repeated obeisances to Krishna, who is Govinda, the Lord of the Brahmins, the friend of the cows, and the benefactor of the universe. Because he never saw any difference between Mahaprabhu and Krishna, he never used any new or separate mantra for the worship of Lord Chaitanya. Advaita Prabhu was the first to boldly proclaim that Mahaprabhu was none other than the Supreme Lord himself. And it was Advaita, too, who was given the vision of Mahaprabhu as the universal form. Advaita Prabhu's first son, Achyutananda, was born in 1493, 7 years after Mahaprabhu was born. And Balaram, Gopal, Krishnadas, and the twins, Jagadish and Swarup, were born at intervals of 4 years, all from the womb of his first wife, Sita Devi. Ultimately, Advaita Prabhu rejected 3 of his sons for deviating from the path of Mahaprabhu and accepted 3, Achyutananda, Gopal, and Krishnadas. Balaram and Krishnadas were the only 2 sons to enter household life, and the other 4 became sannyasis. All the children took initiation from their mother, Sita Devi. The Prema Vilas says that Sri Devi, the younger sister, had a baby as well, a boy named Chota Shamadas, but the child is said to have died immediately after birth. Achyutananda was considered Advaita's greatest son. Some say that he took initiation from Gadadhar Pandit and lived in Puri as Gadadhar's servant. Tradition holds that Achyutananda embodied pure devotion in the spirit of his father. Advaita Prabhu was always eager to receive the dust of Nimai Pandit's feet, to serve him as a humble devotee. But Nimai always treated Advaita as his worshipable superior. Therefore, Advaita Prabhu devised a plan, or rather a trick, to obtain Mahaprabhu's mercy. So we read about that already. Yeah. Was that, someone said a question? No? Okay. All right, this has a little more detail here, so I'll keep reading. And because of this, Advaita was preaching impersonal Mayavad philosophy, Mahaprabhu became furious, traveling from Navadvip just to chastise him. The two divine brothers first consulted with Gauridas Pandit, who reported that when he had asked Advaita Prabhu if we are all to be considered one with God, Advaita replied, yes. And then he showed Gauridas his four-armed form, and later also a six-armed form. Mahaprabhu was actually amused when he heard this, but he pretended to be in an angry mood of Lord Nrsingadev. Rushing to where Advaita Prabhu was staying, he found Advaita preaching his foolish impersonalism. He asked Advaita the following question 3 times. Jnanavad va bhaktivad. Which is better, devotion to a personal God or impersonalistic monism that is tainted by knowledge? And 3 times Advaita replied, Jnana. Then in a fit of rage, Mahaprabhu kicked him on the back with his lotus feet and started play fighting with him. It was only by Sita Devi's persistent begging that Mahaprabhu desisted. She was unaware that the entire scenario was orchestrated by Advaita Acharya, for he felt that in this way he could easily receive the Lord's attention and mercy. When Mahaprabhu took sannyas, Mother Shachi accused Advaita Acharya, his guru, of initially convincing her first son, Vishnu, to leave her and take sannyas. And now I thought it was after Vishnu took sannyas that she did that, before Lord Chaitanya took sannyas. I mean, there was a long interval there. Anyway, so she accused Advaita of convincing Vishnu to leave home, and so she became angry at him, and excused him. And now he was going to take her youngest child in the same way. For this offense to her guru, Nimai asked her to touch Advaita Prabhu's lotus feet, and then out of pure grateful spirit, true grateful spirit, Nimai gave her the gift of divine love. One day the 3 lords, Nimai, Nitai, and Advaita, Nitai is Nityananda, Nimai is Lord Chaitanya, of course, they desired to dramatically perform Krishna's toll collecting sport, or Dana Lila. Advaita played Krishna, Mahaprabhu played Radha, and Nityananda played the gopis' older governess, who accompanied them. Srivas Thakur and other devotees played the gopis, and Kamalakanta, Gauridas Pandit, and others played the cowherd boys. They dressed themselves in appropriate costumes and hired a boat on the bank of the Ganges, decorating the boat as well as the ghat with sandalwood paste, vermilion, and flower garlands. The boys dug up various sticks, flutes, and bugle horns so they could really simulate the paraphernalia that Krishna and his associates would actually have. They stopped playing on their horns when they saw Sri Radha and her friends coming with big earthen pots on their heads. The old lady, Nitai, announced, "We are on our way to Mathura to sell our curd, milk, and sweet rice." Subal replied, "Why have you come here? You must pay tax in this place." Then Krishna came forward and said, "Yes, you must pay." The gopis tried to negotiate, and they were willing to give 4 coins per person, but Krishna wanted 8. Just then the gopis said, "You're supposed to be a king's son, Krishna. Aren't you ashamed? Don't you have enough money already? Let us pass at once." To this Krishna replied, "Well, since all of you gopis have such heavy breasts and buttocks, it will not be possible for me to take more than one of you on my boat at a time. My boat leaks, you see." Reacting to this statement, Nitai, as the older gopi, began to scold Krishna, saying, "Let us pass immediately, otherwise our curd and milk will go sour." But Krishna would not hear of it. He insisted on a double fee for the overweight caused by the gopis' weight and ornaments, and he threatened to smash the pots on their heads with his stick if they to smash the pots they were carrying on their heads with his stick if they did not pay. At this point, the 3 lords jumped in the water in ecstasy and played there while the other devotees performed kirtan on the bank. Lord Chaitanya. Another pastime. It is said that Advaita Prabhu remained manifest on earth for a full 125 years. for a full 25 years after the disappearance of Mahaprabhu, an event that had Advaita and his family in a tearful state for months. Feeling separation from Nimai and Nitai, Nityananda, constantly remembering them and chanting their names, he called together his favorite sons, Achyutananda, Gopal, and Krishnadas, and he sent for Virachandra Prabhu and Gauridas Pandit from Ambika Kalna, as well as his leading disciples, Yadunandana Acharya, Shamdas, and Kamadev. They performed kirtan in a state of divine rapture, and Advaita suddenly made his way into the deity room of Sri Radha Madana Gopal, never again to return. Must have merged in the deity. This event constitutes the disappearance of Advaita Prabhu in 1559 in Shantipur. Advaita Prabhu was manifest on earth for 125 years, just like Sri Krishna, but his Lila is divided into 5 phases. As in Krishna's Lila, Advaita manifested first all 3 phases, Kaumara, childhood, Poganda, boyhood, and Kaishora, youth. But Advaita Prabhu also displayed a 4th and 5th stage, known as Yovana, adulthood, and Vardakya, or transcendental old age. According to recognized acharyas, Advaita in his idealized form in the eternal Navadvip looks like an ever-fresh youth, despite his old age. Reference to a youthful and unbearded Advaita can also be found in Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentary on Chaitanya Bhagavat. However, Vaishnavacharyas have concluded that because Advaita was the senior Vaishnava of his time, some 50 years older than Mahaprabhu, he can properly be depicted with long white hair and a beard in his manifest earthly pastimes. Now, I remember there was a whole debate when they installed those main deities in Mayapur, the wonderful Panchatattva, larger than life, whether Advaita should have the beard or not. And my understanding was just because Prabhupada always had called them the paint with the beard and had so many Panchatattwas installed that we use that. But here it apparently is also a deeper reason for that. Yeah. And what to speak of the old peacock feather thing, which we won't get in now. Whether Lord Chaitanya, if we had peacock feather and Lord Nityananda. You remember that? Do you remember that? Were you here when we had that? I don't know if you were, it was maybe before your time. That's good. Anyway, it was really settled. We had a wonderful photo of Prabhupada worshipping Gaura Nitai, and they both have these peacock feathers. And he instructed us to dress them that way. It should be said in conclusion that Advaita Prabhu was clearly the efficient cause, means the main ultimate cause, of both Mahaprabhu's appearance and disappearance. While his fervent prayers, Hankar, loudly calling out, brought Mahaprabhu to this planet, a point we have already touched upon, it was his cryptic poem, this is explained in the CC, saying that, quote, rice is no longer needed in the marketplace because everyone has become mad like Mahaprabhu himself, that led to Mahaprabhu's disappearance. This sonnet has a concealed meaning that bewildered the mass of devotees. Only Srup Damodar, Mahaprabhu, and perhaps Jagadishananda, who brought the poem to Mahaprabhu from Advaita Acharya, were able to fully understand it. Basically, the rice referred to Mahaprabhu himself, and since love of God had spread sufficiently means all over, the rice was no longer needed. Advaita was in essence saying that Mahaprabhu had fulfilled his mission, had accomplished what he had intended to achieve. Since people were now intoxicated with love of God, Mahaprabhu no longer needed to stay on the planet to supply rice in the marketplace. In this way, Advaita Prabhu plays what in some ways may be considered the most important role in Mahaprabhu's pastimes. He unveils the Lord's Lila for the conditioned souls of the phenomenal world, and then after accomplishing Mahaprabhu's mission of love, he winds it up and sends it back to the spiritual world. And that's the end of the section on Sri Advaita Prabhu. And perhaps any further pastimes, comments? Yes, Prabhu? Yeah. Oh, the mic. Where is Bhakti Michael, by the way? I haven't seen him in a while. Go ahead.
So, when Nimai wasn't taking breast milk from Mother Shachi, it was because she was uninitiated and it couldn't be considered prasadam. That was the reason.
That's the way it said, yeah.
And so then, was it Ishvara Puri who initiated Mother Shachi and Jagannath Mishra, or who was it?
No. I didn't think it said exactly who.
It didn't say.
It
Okay.
didn't say, yeah. I don't remember anyway.
And then
research that for you.
And then so Advaita Acharya, he rejected some of his sons because they rejected Maha. Were they like Mayavadis or something like that?
I don't remember being Mayavadis, but they weren't. They went to be
Mayavadis. 3 of
Mayavadis.
them.
Okay, yeah.
And then, but the rest, they took initiation from Sita Devi. Was that what it said? Is that what it? I thought I heard it. Yeah. Yeah.
That's his wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah, you can borrow the book if you want.
Yeah.
See, yeah, there's a bunch of them. There's the famous Ganga Mata Goswamini was the famous, and some others. Jahnavi, Lord Chaitanya wife. Advaita Acharya ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Go ahead, Vijay.
I have a question.
Okay.
Dravida Prabhu, you know better than me that the Panchatattva is made of 5 tattvas.
Yeah.
My question is, what is the tattva represented by Advaita Acharya?
He's Vishnu Tattva. He's known to be an incarnation of Mahavishnu. This is explained at length in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. There's 2 verses in that Mangala about Advaita Acharya, and the first one describes him as Mahavishnu. So he's Mahavishnu, but there's this close association with Shiva, especially Sadashiva. And so this book describes, and I'm sure he's taking it from some authorized source, more about his relationship as Lord Shiva as well. But in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, the emphasis is on him as being Mahavishnu, as a Vishnu Tattva there. Is that okay?
Thank you, Prabhu.
Sure.
Yes, Hare Krishna.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Sri Advaita Acharya. Now those who can, please assemble at noon for the big kirtan, and then we'll have break the fast with Mahaprasad. Haribol.
What is the name of the book from which you are reading?
The name of the book is Sri Panchatattva, The 5 Features of God by Stephen J. Rosen, who's Satyaraj Das. Okay?
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you for nice class. Hare Krishna.